All right, well, welcome back to Reason and Theology. A survey was just conducted on United States Catholics among also various groups of Latin American Catholics. So it's a pretty large survey. And it shows that Pope Francis's popularity has significantly declined in the last few years among the group of people that was polled. I don't think that's very surprising to us. I think most of us probably expected that. And we'll talk about a few of the reasons why that has likely happened. Maybe even more interestingly, is the same survey also shows a significant amount of Catholics are dissenting against the teaching authority of the Catholic Church in a number of areas on the question of women's ordination, on the question of same sex unions, all kinds of things. So we're going to take a look at both of those. Before we dive in, however, before I bring it up on the screen and we take a look at all of the details, I want to remind you, hit the like button and especially the subscribe button. I really appreciate all of y'all who have been supporting the channel for a long time now. Thank you so much. Thank you for everybody who has subscribed. And those of y'all who have not subbed yet, but you've been benefiting from the channel, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button for me. It would help me out tremendously. Let me share my screen so we can take a look at the survey. Just came out. I haven't really seen anybody discuss this yet. So this is brand spanking new. Pew survey in the United States and Latin America gauges views on church teachings and the popularity of Pope Francis. I think we all knew intuitively Pope Francis's popularity has decreased. I think we all knew intuitively that a lot of Catholics don't believe Catholic teachings. But now we have the actual survey to show that, to prove that, to demonstrate that. And I'm hoping this is going to get the attention of the bishops and especially the Pope to perhaps address this issue and correct it. Okay, so the Pew Research Center has released the results of a survey of how Catholics in the United States and 6 Latin American countries feel the church should handle a variety of issues related to the priesthood, contraception, and sexuality, as well as their views of Pope Francis. Let me just stop right there and say, look, this survey, as far as feedback to the Pope and bishops, this is gold. This is more than the Synod on Synodality will ever yield as far as benefit and feedback to the bishops. You know, the purpose of the Synod on Synodality was to get feedback from the laity and other people. That was one of the purposes. You know what? I honestly think that this survey is going to do a whole lot more good than the Synod will when it comes to feedback. So let's see what it says. In its survey of more than 12,000 Catholics in the United States, Mexico, Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, and Peru, Pew found widespread dissent from church teachings. That shouldn't come as a shocker. I've been talking about this for years, including majorities of Catholics in every country except Mexico in favor of allowing women to become priests. That's very disturbing because the Catholic Church teaches that ordination to the priesthood is reserved to men alone, and that teaching is an infallible teaching. And the church uses language for that infallible teaching that would indicate if you dissent from that, you're no longer in full communion with the Catholic Church. So these are not issues of, well, I kind of disagree with this thing that's debatable in Catholicism. No. This is a disagreement with an infallible teaching in the Catholic Church. By the way, a teaching that multiple times Pope Francis has upheld. He has upheld the inability of women to be ordained to the priesthood. But the fact that you're seeing a large amount of Catholics saying, hey, we're in favor of allowing women to become priests, that tells you there is a failure in catechesis at a very significant level. We've also seen this with results from surveys that demonstrate that a lot of Catholics don't believe in the real presence of Jesus in the Eucharist, and that they deny transubstantiation, a dogma, another infallible teaching of the church. There's a massive failure to catechize Catholics when we see this. Support for the ordination of women to the priesthood ranged from a high in 83% in Brazil. Think about that. 83% of Catholics in Brazil hold to something that impairs their communion with the Catholic Church. That tells you 83% of Catholics in Brazil are not in full communion with the Catholic Church. In other words, they're not fully Catholic anymore. 83%. This is wild. To a low of 47% in Mexico. And that's the low. For a low, that's really high. 64% of U.S. Catholics surveyed were also in favor, slightly higher than the 62% when Pew surveyed American Catholics on the issue 10 years ago. So in other words, more people in the United States are rejecting this infallible teaching than before, than 10 years ago. The majority of Catholics in America have just said they're not in full communion with the Catholic Church. That's what they just said. Because again, the exclusivity of ordination to the priesthood reserved to men alone is an infallible teaching according to Ordinatio Sacerdotalis under John Paul II. It's explicitly identified as an infallible teaching. And Ratzinger and Bertone, Benedict XVI, in his document on the commentary on the profession of faith, explicitly notes, when you deny a teaching of this category, you can no longer claim to be in full communion with the Catholic Church. You're not in good standing with the Catholic Church. So in other words, the majority of Catholics in the United States aren't actually Catholics. I don't think that comes as a surprise, though, for anybody who watches this channel often. I've been pointing this problem out for quite a while. I've been showing how there's a massive amount of dissent in the Catholic Church. Paul says, not being in full communion means they can't take the Eucharist. Oddly enough, though, oddly enough, whether you like it or not, if you deny a secondary object of infallibility, which ordination to the priesthood, this is one of them. If you deny a secondary object of infallibility, the CDF has clarified you could still receive communion, even though you're not in full communion. Oddly enough, I've pointed this out as an inconsistency in the Code of Canon Law, because canonically they're still allowed to receive communion when doctrinally they're acknowledged to be impaired in their communion with Catholic Church. Now, you deny dogma, a primary object of infallibility, you can be denied communion in that case. But a denial of a secondary object of infallibility, though it impairs your communion with the Catholic Church, canonically, according to the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, and according to canon law, you can still receive communion. I've criticized that, and I've said this part of canon law needs to be adjusted to reflect the doctrine. I've pointed that out before. Anyways, moving forward. It goes on to say, support for female ordination varied widely by age, however. For example, only 34% of Mexican Catholics above age 40 favor female ordination, compared to 64% in the 18 to 39 age bracket. You hear that? 34% of Mexican Catholics above age 40 favor female ordination, compared to 64% in the 18 to 39 age bracket. Now, we have long thought that, oh, this younger generation, the young guys, oh, they're traditional, they're orthodox, they're going to purify the church. Turns out those between the age of 18 to 39 in the United States, I'm sorry, in Mexico at least, are in favor of women's ordination. I suspect the same is for the United States. Well, it gives us a little more detail. It's around the same. In the US, by contrast, older Catholics are more supportive of female ordination. The younger Catholics, with 66% of those above age 40 in favor of women's ordination, compared to 57% between 18 to 39. So it's still relatively the same. And what does that show you? That shows you the majority of young people in the United States, young Catholics, 18 to 39, aren't going to be the saviors of the Catholic Church that we thought that they were. They're not these traditional, pious Catholics that we thought they were going to be. Whenever we're seeing 57% of them aren't in full communion with the Catholic Church and hold to a very liberal understanding of ordination. According to the survey, most Catholics in all 7 countries want the church to allow Catholics to use birth control, including 86% of Argentinians and 83% of Americans. So you heard that correctly. The vast majority of Catholics in the United States, 83%, are opposed to Humanae Vitae. They're explicitly opposed to the teachings of the magisterium. Now, I just got to push pause and kind of point something out, as I've often pointed out. I'm going to have to do it again. If 83% reject Humanae Vitae, who's going to call them out? Who's going to correct them? Who's going to call them to assent to the magisterium? It certainly can't be all those Catholic YouTubers and content creators and people on social media who reject the magisterium elsewhere and accuse the magisterium of heresy. It can't be them. They can't call them to obey the magisterium. They're not going to be the ones. The vast majority of Catholic influencers cannot tell those 83% people to follow the magisterium and follow Humanae Vitae when they don't follow the magisterium themselves. The only ones who can call them to repentance, the only ones, I have a whole bookshelf of books there that just fell down. That's what you heard. The only ones who can call them to assent to the magisterium are those who assent to the magisterium all around. So you can't tell Catholics who are dissenting against Humanae Vitae follow the magisterium when you are not following the magisterium elsewhere. If you're rejecting Fiducia Supplicans or Amor Laetitia or something else that the magisterium teaches, you can't tell them, hey, listen to the magisterium when you yourself don't do that. This is a massive problem, because not only are we seeing 83% are in dissent, but then the question is, who's going to call them to obedience? Who's going to call them to assent? Who's left who hasn't bowed the knee to Baal? Not a lot of Catholics. In one way or another, a lot of them have bowed the knee to Baal. Whether on the liberal side or the radical traditionalist side, a lot have bowed the knee to Baal and have rejected the authority of the magisterium in one way or another, in one shape or another. So this is not only depressing insofar as we're seeing so many Catholics are really, really severely poorly catechized, in dissent, but we're also seeing there's very few who are in a position to call them out on it and to call them to assent to the magisterium. That's what's even more depressing about this. I am hoping that the bishops will get this feedback and do something about it, because unfortunately they have allowed this situation to fester, because they have not been calling people out for this either. They've been silent about massive dissent in the church. But it goes on. It says a lot more. Opinion is more divided on whether the church should allow priests to marry. Roughly two-thirds of Catholics in the United States, Argentina, and Chile are in favor, but majority in Mexico and Peru say the church should not allow priests to marry. Views on whether the church should recognize the marriage of gay and lesbian couples also varied. Obviously, these two are not in the same category. The married priesthood is apostolic, so is the celibate priesthood. And the Catholic Church has both. It has married priests and celibate priests. So that issue does not belong in this category. This issue of married priesthood is disciplinary. This issue of same-sex unions and same-sex marriage, quote unquote, that is doctrinal, not merely disciplinary. Views on whether the church should recognize the marriages of gay and lesbian couples also varied, with majorities in 4 of the countries opposing such recognition, while just over half of United States Catholics are in favor. So a little over half of the Catholics in the United States, they want to see same-sex marriage. I suspect this is also including young people, not just old people. The survey results reflect a divergence from several of the Catholic Church's teachings, such as the ordination of men as the only valid recipients of priestly ordination. According to canon law, both a woman who receives priestly ordination and the one who ordains her is automatically excommunicated. On priestly celibacy, the Catechism states that in the Latin Church, priests are chosen from men of faith who live a celibate life. The Catechism clarifies that while married men can be ordained priests in Eastern churches, celibacy is also held in great honor, and bishops are chosen only from celibates. Birth control was addressed by Paul VI in Humanae Vitae, which states that any action which either before, during, or after sexual intercourse seeks to make procreation impossible is intrinsically evil. So if you have a situation where the church is abundantly clear in its teachings, and there is something to be said by way of criticism that the church isn't always very clear on some points, and that's been a problem for 2,000 years. But there are certainly some doctrines the church has been very clear about, and this is one of them. Even in a case where there is just very clear teaching on a prohibition of contraception, you still have the majority of Catholics in the United States who are in dissent. It's not just the German bishops anymore. It's not just the Germans anymore, as we once thought with those who rejected Humanae Vitae. It's also now the United States and the majority of Catholics in the United States. Regarding communion, canon law prohibits its administration to include those obstinately persevering in manifest grave sin, including cohabitation and sexual activity outside of marriage. On same-sex unions, the Catholic Church teaches that homosexual acts are intrinsically disordered, emphasizing that marriage is the union between one man and one woman. But evidently, the majority of Catholics in the United States don't believe that, because they want to see same-sex unions recognized as marriages. Well, it continues. Pope Francis's popularity. The latest Pew survey also finds that most Catholics in the United States and Latin America still view Pope Francis favorably, although this percentage has declined over the years. So it's going down. In his native Argentina, however, over the last decade, his favorable rating has fallen from 98% to 74%. That's a significant decrease. Chile has seen the second largest decline, going from 79% to 64%. So people are losing confidence in Pope Francis. In Colombia, the Holy Father's favorable ratings have fallen from 93% to 88%. Brazil, 92% to 84%. In Mexico, 86 to 80. Notice all these are going down. In the U.S., and his favorability has fallen from 85% to 74%. And in Peru, from 83 to 78. Wow. Why is that? Well, before we continue with the results of the survey, well, I think we kind of know why. There's a number of factors here. I've documented all of them on this channel extensively. Let's just briefly recap a few of them. Sometimes Pope Francis says things that are not very clear and aren't very helpful to Catholics who are trying to evangelize people or converts who have came into the Catholic Church. Sometimes he says some things that could be interpreted in a way that's unfavorable to those people who are bringing people in the church and have converted to the Catholic Church. And sometimes it can be discouraging to them. And there's occasions where, again, he hasn't spoken very clearly on certain doctrines when we need him to be very clear about those doctrines, because they're certainly in dispute today among a lot of people, both outside the church and even in the Catholic Church. So a lack of clarity in some cases. Now, I've also documented extensively on this channel. In many cases, Pope Francis is clear, but his critics twist his words, misrepresent him, misreport him, put a spin on what he says. And the majority of people who, hear anything about the Catholic Church, they just see the headlines. They don't actually look into what the Pope said. So in a lot of these cases, it's not that Pope Francis isn't clear. There are some cases where he's not. A lot of these cases, it's not that he's not clear. It's just people aren't being fair and they're not being honest. And a lot of people just don't actually look into the issues. So they're just going to get a really negative impression of Pope Francis when they see certain headlines and they don't actually go and verify them. I imagine that's also discouraged a lot of people. I can't tell you how many times I have seen people in the comment section who tell me Pope Francis approves of gay marriage. Do you know how many times I've seen that? Numerous times. Despite the fact that Pope Francis explicitly rejects gay marriage. We have him on video saying that. I've seen people say he says homosexuality is not a sin, despite the fact we have him on video explicitly saying homosexuality is a sin. That's a direct quote. Why do they have that impression? Well, not because they're listening to him, but because they're listening to headlines that misrepresent him. And if you're one of those people, and I suspect that's a lot of people, if you're one of those people who just kind of looks at the headlines and you don't really look into things, you don't look under the surface, I suspect you're really going to resent the Pope. So I imagine that has factored into this decrease here. Another thing, sometimes he's had some unpopular decisions, maybe even inconsistent decisions. One that I've pointed out was Traditionis Custodes. That would need to be balanced out with a disciplining of Novus Ordo masses that engage in abuse. But there was only a targeting of certain Misso 62 communities rather than Novus Ordo communities. And that's going to cause a lot of resentment. That's going to cause a lot of unpopularity when you're targeting one group and being less severe on another, when you need to be more balanced. So I think that that's also caused some of this decrease in popularity that we see here. I hope that the Pope will receive this feedback and use that to make certain changes, to be more balanced, to be more clear, and to address fake news about himself. Pope Francis could put in an end to the fake news very easily. As soon as fake news erupts about him, he could just come out in a press conference and state very clearly what his position is. That would go a long way. I hope that he receives this feedback. And if he doesn't, at least I hope future popes will. But it continues. The survey also found that most Catholics believe Pope Francis represents a change in the direction of the Catholic Church, though whether that change is considered major or minor varies significantly. Well, all popes have introduced change, but whether it's a major or minor, whether it's doctrinal, disciplinary, those are going to be very different things, right? So in the United States, 42% of Catholics surveyed consider that Pope Francis represents a major change in the direction of the Catholic Church. So almost half of Catholics in the United States think that Pope Francis is significantly changing the Catholic Church. Gee, I wonder where they got that idea from. I wonder. Huh. While 30% say he represents a minor change, 12% say he represents no change at all, and 14 aren't sure. In Colombia, by contrast, 62% believe the Pope represents a major change. So the majority here. 19% see only a minor change. Chile is where Catholics are least likely to believe Francis is bringing a major change to the church's direction, with 21% seeing it as major and 26% as minor. Pope Francis has led the Catholic Church since 2013, it notes, when he succeeded Benedict XVI. And this is effectively the result when you survey people about him, about his popularity. It's not looking good. I think we're coming towards the end of this pontificate, and we're seeing the net result. And it doesn't seem to be very favorable. Is there still time to change that? I think so. I think Pope Francis could make certain changes to adjust this, to account for this feedback. I don't know if he will, but I think he could. I also think the bishops could as well. I don't know if they will, but I think they could. But I sure hope that the Holy Father gets a hold of the results here and takes that into account. Really, you didn't need a survey to know this. If you've just been paying attention, you could already tell this was the case. You could already tell the majority of Catholics don't believe what the Catholic Church teaches. You already know that. You don't need a survey to tell you that. If you did, now you have it. You didn't really need a survey to tell you that Pope Francis is decreasing in popularity. If you did, now you have it. But I think that was already apparent if you just follow social media and Catholic media personalities. It's pretty clear how they view him. And content creators, media personalities, that's going to influence the way people say things. If you saw these influencers speaking really well about Pope Francis, that would trickle down to the average Catholic. But if you see them constantly criticizing him, constantly misrepresenting him, constantly bearing false witness, constantly accusing him of heresy, well, is it really a surprise when people think that, oh, he represents a major change in the church and he's decreasing in popularity? You shouldn't be surprised. So what do we need to do about that? The laity can only do so much, though. At the end of the day, if the laity aren't going to do it, the bishops need to. They need to step in and say something and address some of this stuff. Maybe address some of the misinformation. Do you know how many times I have seen the Catholic Church misrepresented, Pope Francis misrepresented, and the bishops are just silent? They don't say a word. It's weird. And then the few that speak up are the ones joining in with the misinformation. And there's this silent majority who don't say anything. It's odd. So how has this worked so far by being silent? Has it worked well for Catholics? No. So what needs to be done to change this? I think it's pretty obvious what needs to be done. If not, this is just going to get worse and worse and worse. People are going to dissent more and more and more. And they're going to follow the church less and less and less. All right. I want to briefly shift gears and follow up with the situation about Pastor Steve Lawson. There is an update there. I did a show talking about Pastor Steve Lawson, his unfortunate fall from grace, what we can learn from it. Very sad situation. I pointed out at the time that the way the church phrased the situation, I think it was Trinity Bible Church that came out with an announcement. I pointed out the way they phrased how the situation became known was a little ambiguous. Did Pastor Steve Lawson come out on his own initiative and tell the elders of this Protestant church that he had been inappropriate with this lady, or if that was something that they discovered, or was he pressured into telling them because somebody else was going to be telling them? We got an update on that, and it was way worse than we thought. Which makes my point that I made the other day when I went over what are some lessons that we can learn. It makes my point or points that much more clear. One of my points was beware of false prophets that come to you in sheep's clothing. You can have somebody who is preaching from the pulpit holiness and living according to God's law, and then we find out all this was going on with that person at the same time. That's wild. Be aware of false prophets. Well, I want to show you the update. Before I do so, I want to remind you, if you just tuned in, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. I would greatly appreciate your support of this channel, especially if you've been benefiting from the content here. Take just a second out to hit the subscribe button and the like button. Let me share my screen to give an update here. Pastor Steve Lawson, again, to recap, huge figure in the Protestant world, especially the Reformed Protestant world, among your Calvinists. Back when I was a Calvinist, huge influence in my life. Him and others like R.C. Sproul, John MacArthur, and a few others. He's in that category, Steve Lawson. And we find out he's been having this inappropriate relationship with a woman. They didn't give a whole lot of details at the time, but this has been going on for a while. We didn't know how long. We're about to find out. Meanwhile, he's been preaching all these messages about holiness and criticizing others for a lack of holiness while he was doing this. That's concerning. Here is the update. Brace yourselves. Let me make sure that you can hear the audio. Okay.
It's publicly known. Does it change if it's a private sin? If a pastor has disqualified himself and no one knows about it? And in the case of Steve Lawson, I know that this was an ongoing thing. This was a relationship that had developed over the course of years.
You hear that? So this wasn't something recent. Over the course of years, turns out 5 years. So all those sermons and homilies critiquing seeker-sensitive churches and critiquing homosexuality and transgenderism, meanwhile, you're doing this? Wow.
I think about 5 years is what I understand.
Yeah, and I've had multiple people reach out to me with the story. It's making its way out there, and I know it's frustrating for a lot of the people who respect Steve Lawson and feel like he's just been erased and they don't have any explanation. But the thumbnail is that this was a relationship that developed over the course of years with a woman who was in her 20s.
You heard that right. I think Steve Lawson is what, 73, 76, something like that, in her 20s for 5 years.
And it was it was a compromising relationship, and Steve Lawson did not come forward of his own accord. He was essentially, it was found out, and
now listen to that. When this originally came out, I said it could be that he came forward. A lot of people were interpreting the letter that way, but I was saying, wait, not necessarily. Could be that he, only spoke up because somebody else was going to be breaking the news, so gave him an opportunity to say it himself before he comes and says it. Turns out that was actually the case.
Father of this young lady ended up going to the elders and telling them this is what's going on, and that was on Tuesday, and then by Thursday morning, everything's gone from a number of different ministry websites.
Now, that information is not accurate. It was not the father who went and told the elders. The father was going to tell the elders, and Steve Lawson therefore received enough pressure from the father to go and tell him himself, or the father would be saying something, which is exactly what I speculated before. I said, don't jump to conclusions. Just because he informed the elders doesn't mean that he did so voluntarily. Could be that someone was pressuring him. I said that, and here it is. Turns out the father basically made him go and tell the elders. So this was not a person who came to a moment of repentance. I saw so many people saying, oh, but he's repentant. I'm like, wait, hold on. You don't know that. And in fact, there was language in the message indicating that he wasn't repentant. And this would show you there's no repentance there, because he did not come of his own volition. He was basically being forced to by the father of this 20-something-year-old lady.
Right. And so that's, and I don't know if I want to get any more details than that. I think that's probably enough, unless you want to say more. But that's a private thing. No one knew about it until the father of this young.
Now, there is a clarification here from Phil Johnson from Grace Community Church, John MacArthur's church. He says, almost, Steve himself informed the elders, but only after the girl's father had confronted Steve and threatened exposure. This was not a noble confession of sin. Right. So that tells you what? People can live significantly contradictory double lives. We've seen that multiple times with various ministers. Here's another one. Inappropriate is too ambiguous, as if something merely caught them holding hands. This was a 5-year relationship with strong romantic overtones. Both parties insist no literal fornication was involved, but their tie to one another was adulterous in spirit, if not in fact. I don't believe that for 1 second. I don't believe that for 1 second. You know why? I suspect both of them are going to say, only now after it's come out, I suspect both of them are going to say it wasn't actually sexual in nature. They didn't actually engage in the act. Because if they did, Lawson would go to jail. And if this lady has some strong relationship with him, she didn't cut it off. This just came out because of the father. So she didn't cut it off. She still wants it. She's going to cover for him. She's not going to say, yeah, we've been engaging in these acts that are going to send him to jail. She's not going to do it. And you think he's going to come out and say, oh, yeah, I engaged in these acts that send me to jail. You think he's going to be honest? So, of course, both of them are not going to be honest here. Now, if the lady had come out and broke off the relationship or something, then I might believe her, but I don't believe her one bit, and I don't believe him one bit. So when they both say this didn't actually lead to that, I don't believe that for 1 second. I think it's pretty clear what was going on here. But he says, either way, however it shakes down, he says this was wrong. He is 73. She's in her late 20s. She's not a member of his church. In fact, she lives in a different state, nowhere close to any of his ministries. I don't believe any good end would be served by exposing her identity to the public. I think that that's ridiculous. I don't know why you would protect her identity. She's of age, clearly. Oh, and if he's saying she's in her late 20s, some might argue, well, nothing illegal was done. I don't know. Was it more than that? Was it more than 5 years? Do we actually know that? Do we really know her age? We don't if they don't tell us who this was. And so other people are asking further questions like, okay, well, was she involved in one of the seminaries that he taught at or something like that? I haven't seen answers there. I don't know under what circumstances they met, what was going on, but clearly this was inappropriate. And then again, it shows you how people can live these double lives. And the saddest part about all this, the thing that really broke me, I saw so many comments from people saying that they've lost faith in the church, that they've lost faith in the Christian message because of this. Now, I understand just because someone is a hypocrite, it doesn't mean that the faith is wrong. And if you paid attention to the faith, it says that, the Bible clearly says there's going to be hypocrites. There's going to be false teachers. There's going to be wolves in sheep's clothing. So really that shouldn't be something that makes or breaks your faith. Whenever you find out that somebody lives a double life, you should already know that there's going to be that factor somewhere because scripture talks about it. Nonetheless, it's still sad to see that. Again, whether or not people are using that as an excuse, or whether you have some sincere people who really are so scandalized that they've left the faith, either way, this is a bad look, and it's not helpful. But I do want to remind people, don't let that, however, be an excuse. Just because someone is a hypocrite, just because someone is a liar, doesn't mean the faith isn't true. Let every man be a liar. God is still true. If everyone is a liar, God is still true. Don't let this be an excuse or an occasion to leave the faith. This isn't something that falsifies the Christian message. It confirms the Christian message because the Christian message notes that we will always have hypocrites, wolves in sheep's clothing, and so on. But then I also saw some other people who kind of went to the other extreme, and then they're like, what's the big deal? The Bible says we're all sinners. Yeah, it does, but it also calls us to a life of holiness, and that completely undermines everyone who has been faithful to their marriage. What about all those Christians out there who died being faithful to their spouse? You just undermined all of them. So I don't want to go to the other extreme. This isn't a big deal. We're all sinners. Don't downplay the gravity of sin. Yeah, we're all sinners, but that doesn't mean we're all engaging in this kind of grave depravity, massive hypocrisy. No, that's not normal. That's not common. Or at least it shouldn't be. So I kind of want to avoid both of those errors. People who want to use this as a reason to leave the faith, and others who want to just pretend, there's no big deal here. There's no issue. Yikes. Well, I want to take a look at your chat questions. Put them in the chat. Make sure to put them to @Reason of Theology. I'm going to give y'all just a second to put them there. Again, make sure to put @Reason of Theology so I know you're asking me a question and not making a comment to someone else. I'll take just a few minutes of questions from y'all. I'm going to step away, grab me some coffee while y'all put that there in the chat. So, be right back. Okay. So let's see what we have. So Michael says, you, my friend, can take your cultural, relativist, secular Pharisee you call a pope and schism off to your heresy. Okay, thank you so much for that, Michael. Michael thinks that I'm a cultural relativist, secular Christian, evidently. For anybody who's ever watched me, I don't suppose that's really what they would come away with, that I'm a cultural relativist, that I'm secular. I don't know. It seems like I might be the exact opposite of that. All right, we'll go with it. Sure. Let's see what else we got in the chat here. Let's see what else we got. I'm looking. See a lot of comments, but I'm looking for questions specifically to me. Shell says, stir the coffee with your bacon stick. So I learned recently from Shell that there is such a thing as bacon flavored coffee. Did not know about this. Coffee cup number, what at this point? Probably, I think this is probably my third cup, but as I've often pointed out, it might be 5 cups that really amounts to one, because what I'll do is I'll drink a few sips here and there, and then it gets really cold, and then I don't drink it anymore, so I just dump it out and get another one. So maybe 5 is equals to 1. Okay. Let's see what else we got. Great Wall says, to @Michael, if there is a topic that you are worried about, Michael has probably done a video on it that you could learn from. That's true. That's true. Most of the things that people object to whenever they come into the comment section and begin to troll, like you just saw, I usually have a dozen videos addressing that topic. So yeah, you're right about that. Yi says, to be fair, I think Michael was calling the Pope that, not you. True, he was, but he was saying that I'm the follower of such a Pope. So what would that make me? It would make me the same thing. Shepherd Dodd says, hey, Michael, I don't know if you'll see this, but thank you so much for what you do. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Thank you for the kind words. Sly Guy says, how much of the disapproval for Pope Francis is down to the majority of respondents descending from church teaching? Let me make sure I understand the question. It seems like those two went hand in hand. If we're seeing more people dissenting against the magisterium and more people being less favorable to the Pope, it would seem to me that goes hand in hand. Michael says, calling out the Pope for being a bad Pope objectively doesn't make me not in communion with Catholic Church. Yeah, I don't think that, like, if you say someone is a bad Pope, I don't think that makes you not a Catholic. But is that all you really did, Michael? I think you might want to go back and read your comment. Jen says, how's the tattoo removal fund going? I think I only had one donation so far for $5 for it. I did come across something else though. let me maybe see if I could pull it up for you since you bring it up. I wasn't gonna bring it up, but since y'all did, let me get it for you here. Well, hold on, give me a second. See if I can find it. Okay, let me screenshot this. I think you'll enjoy it. All right, Jen, got something for you that I think you'll appreciate. There we go. Should be able to see it now. So this is a comment that came in very recently. This was right before the show. Michael, are you not pleased with the body the Lord gave to you so that you need to paint it? I guess this person condemns makeup too. I guess this person condemns clothing as well. This person is running around naked with no clothes and condemns his mother for makeup. So as I note here, I got these when I wasn't a Christian over 20 years ago, but you're the kind of Pharisee that Jesus condemned, just FYI. I can't deal with it. Like this kind of neo-Pharisaicalism that I see in Catholic circles makes me want to vomit. It makes me just want to vomit. It's disgusting. And it comes from people who clearly have never really encountered Christ. Wow. What do you say to that? Okay, so Michael says, and if this Pope is truly embodying the true message of the church, I don't want nothing to do with it. I'll go to Eastern Orthodoxy. And Michael, you think that you're in full communion with the Catholic Church? Sounds to me like you may have already left the faith, if that's an option for you. But I would just have to point out to you that the same problems that you're going to find in Catholicism are in Eastern Orthodoxy. I've documented that extensively on this channel. Okay. So Yes says, the issue is most Catholics don't even believe in scripture or the real presence. It's not surprising then they question the church's teaching and want it to change. I think you're right about that. I think you're right. Absolutely. I just need to get a Yeti thermos for my coffee. See, here's the problem with that, Great Wall. I've thought of this. And I have Yetis. You know why that doesn't work? Coffee from a Yeti doesn't taste the same. Anyone who's a professional coffee drinker would know that. Coffee tastes different coming from different cups. I prefer this one right here. It's a nice, thick cup. Coffee tastes the best from this cup than from the more thinner coffee mugs that I have. It's just a fact. It's just a fact. I don't know if it's psychological or if it really does change the taste of coffee. But it tastes better when it's from a mug like this. And now you introduce a Yeti into the discussion, it does not taste. It's a no for me. It's an absolute no. Tanner says, really sad to see Steve Lawson had a huge impact on me when I was Protestant. Agreed. Same here. Same here. Absolutely. Okay, what else we got? All right. At this point, Michael needs to get an espresso cup to quit wasting coffee. Well, I have one. I have an espresso machine. I got one. It's not the same. It's not. That little tiny cup. Come on. No, I need more than that. It's like when you go to Rome or Israel or anywhere outside of the United States. They give you this little tiny cup of coffee. It's just never enough. Michael says, Francis said, all religions lead to Christ, if I'm correct in my knowledge, and that is false. Maybe watch my shows on that one specifically. I have 2 shows on it that I did. I think it was last week. Maybe also watch the show that I did on that very topic where I show you several Orthodox patriarchs right now, including Bartholomew, said the exact same thing. So if you're considering Eastern Orthodoxy, because Catholicism says that, even though it doesn't, because again, it wasn't magisterial, but because the Pope said that, if you're considering Orthodoxy, then what do you do with Orthodox patriarchs who say that as well? And then I always have people say, but the Orthodox patriarchs are infallible. And I have to point, but Pope Francis isn't being infallible there either, because he's not even using his magisterium. So irrelevant. You have the exact same problem. Exact same issue. Okay. Do Do you think that the Pope's popularity is plummeting because he's getting harder to twist, so journalists aren't using him as much? I don't think that that would be the case. No, I don't have any reason to believe that that's the case. Thank you so much for the super chat here, Shell. Can you do a video over lists of prescribed musical instruments used in Latin liturgy? That would be an interesting one, perhaps. What do I think we can learn from the Protestant pastor's downfall? I did a whole show on it, but just to briefly recap, if a pastor who has devoted his entire life to preaching the gospel can fall like that, so can we. So let that be a warning. Don't get prideful. Don't get boastful. Don't think that you're above those kinds of things. And I've pointed out some scriptures that warn against that. Also, again, warnings against false teachers and wolves in sheep's clothing. If somebody can live a double life like that for over 5 years, is that a false teacher? Is that a wolf in sheep's clothing? You tell me. All right, what else we got here? Looking through the chat. Michael says, forgive me, everyone, if I come off as too strong. Absolutely. Certainly forgiven. Daniel says, I read your book, Answering Orthodoxy, and your videos have really helped me. You are truly the hardest working person on YouTube. Thanks. I appreciate that, Daniel. Yeah, isn't that what they call me? The hardest working man on YouTube? That's great. Victor says it's really the great apostasy. I don't know. I don't know. Is it labor pains leading up to it, or is it the actual great apostasy? Might be labor pains. Dunkin' Donuts coffee is my go-to. It was my go-to back when I lived in New York when I had access to one. Unfortunately, I don't have access to one here in Monroe. They don't have one. I don't think. At least they didn't used to. If they have it now, it might be new. I'm starting to doubt myself on that one. At the very least, up until recently, we didn't have one, but I'm now starting to wonder if we have one. Or is it a Baskin Robbins that I'm thinking about? I don't know. Okay, Sly Guy says, if he teaches orthodoxy, but dissenting Catholics don't accept orthodoxy, they are directly related, right? I don't know if I'm exactly following the question. I apologize. I'm sorry. I don't know if I'm entirely following it. Okay, what else we got? Scrolling through. Where's the tattoo removal fund to help a little with that? So what you could do is let me go to okay. All right, so just if you're serious about it, go over here to Reason and Theology, click on the donate page. And when you go to donate with PayPal, just put in a note that that's what it's for, the tattoo removal fund. And that way I can move it in the fund that currently has $5. One donation. Let's see what else we got. Looking through. Michael says, truly sorry, brother, if I came across as too strong or angry, forgive me and pray for me. Absolutely. Absolutely. No problem. Hey, stick around. I think you'll find, Michael, I think you'll find a lot of the content on this channel has addressed the vast majority, if not all of your objections. I've never really seen somebody who has represented me fairly and accurately who can't at least respect my perspective. Even if you don't agree with it, I think the people who have actually listened to what I have to say, not some caricature of what people say about me, but you actually take the time to listen to what my position is, even if it's not something you'll conclude or come to the conclusion of. I think you'll at least say, but that's respectable. It makes sense. It's reasonable. I might disagree for this or that reason, but I see where you're coming from, kind of thing. So if you stick around, check out a lot of content that I have, likely in the Catholic Controversies playlist. Probably help you out. Okay. I see a comment about Walmart coffee. It's the best. It's the best. Great value. Gotta have it. Tanner says, Michael, you're absolutely right. Coffee does taste better in a mug. On a super important note, how do you like your coffee best poured over? French press, drip. I just do drip. But I need to find out why that is the case, that coffee tastes different according to mugs. You know, it's just as at this point, there's some mugs that I just have, a lot of the mugs that I have in the kitchen that I refuse to use because I know it's just not gonna taste the same. It just doesn't taste the same. Did I see the Twitter message from James Martin to Strickland about obedience? Yes, which I find interesting because I don't believe that Father James Martin assents to Catholic teaching on the question of homosexuality being intrinsically disordered. Does he? It would be good if he came out and clarified that. Does he assent to that teaching? If the answer is yes, then come out and say that. If the answer is no, then you're in no position to call Strickland out for his dissent against the magisterium. Neither one of them can call each other out because they would be two sides to the same dissenting coin, as I've often said. But yeah, that's something I want to know. Hey, look, if he wants to call them out, so does that mean Father James Martin assents to the proposition that homosexuality is intrinsically disordered? That is a proposition of the magisterium. Do you give religious submission of intellect and will to that? If you don't, if you withhold religious submission of intellect and will to that, upon what basis then can you critique others? It's catch-22. Either he can't criticize Strickland, or he needs to come out and say that he assents to what the church teaches here. But you can't have it both ways. Sly Guy says, not espresso, it's espresso, coffee professional here. You're more of a professional on that particular point than I am. Because I just do like regular coffee. I do have that, I guess it's espresso machine. I have one of those. I don't really use it. How's the new semester going? It hasn't started. It starts Monday. So thank you for asking about that. In fact, I'll take y'all to the website. If you go to catholicpolytechnic.org, click on the certificate page, you will see my second course out of 3 courses for the Magisterial Studies certificate program. I will start teaching a course on the historical overview of magisterial interventions. We're going to talk about the magisterium throughout 2,000 years of church history. We're going to go over all of the ecumenical councils, significant papal interventions, and then a few local councils. It's going to be on Mondays, 7:30 p.m. Central, beginning September 30th. So you still got a few more days to sign up. So you'll go over here and just go to the registration form, and you'll sign up there if you want to take it. You don't have to do the first course that we did as a prerequisite to just take this course. Now, if you want the certificate, email me separately about it, and I'll tell you how to go about doing that since we already completed course 1. But if you just want to take this as a standalone, you don't have to take course 1 for the certificate. And if you can't make it to the live lectures, don't worry, because I do pre-record all of the lectures and I have them available in the classroom the very next day for a person to go and watch. So they will be pre-recorded. not pre-recorded. They will be recorded live, but then made available for people after the fact. So yeah, check that out. So the course hasn't started yet, but it will in less than a week. All right, wrapping it up here. Susan says, Walmart coffee is the best in my mind too. I love it. I love it. Team Walmart coffee. We're going to do this. Check this quote out from Benedict XV, who is quoting St. Augustine. Holy Scripture is invested with supreme authority by reason of its sure and momentous teachings. I guess you have a part 2 regarding the faith. Whatever it tells us that we believe it simply because it is written in Scripture. And unless we believe in Scripture, we can neither be Christians nor be saved. Yeah, good quote. Why don't Roman Catholics have a definitive magisterial list of ex-cathedra statements of popes, not who the real popes are or who was anti-pope? What the church does is it gives you the objective indicators to identify what is ex-cathedra, and you just take those objective indicators and you just ask the question, is this particular teaching, does it fit the bill? So it's the same thing. It gets you to the same point. If you have objective indicators, and there are 3 indicators in past returnus of Vatican I, if the church provides those, you can just say, okay, is this present here or not? There it is. That's funny. You could also add a tattoo removal Patreon level. That's great. Grace said, let's make that $5 tattoo removal fine $10. Tattoo edition fund. I do want to get them removed at some point. It would be nice. How did we do through Hurricane Francine? It wasn't a big deal over here where I'm at in northern Louisiana. Okay. Michael, same reason why a proper cup of tea tastes better from frying china. I did not know this. I did not know. I don't really drink tea like that. Okay, I think I'm coming to the end of the questions. All right, just making sure I didn't have any more soup chats or anything. Okay. Anyways, enjoyed the questions and comments there. Hope y'all enjoyed it as well. If you did, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Look forward to seeing y'all tomorrow with another show, so stay tuned for more. All right, see you later.